Hi, everybody. I'm really excited because we've got a co-host today. Pauline Bosma is the founder and coordinator of the Rainbow Support Groups of Massachusetts. Let's get started. Welcome to Impact, the Conversation, a podcast of the University of Minnesota's Institute on Community Integration that brings you strategies and stories advancing the inclusion of people with disabilities. Our guests are the authors of Impact, our long-running magazine that bridges the research to practice gap with professional and personal reflections on what matters most in disability equity today. I'm your host, Janet Stewart. Welcome, everybody. Today we're talking about the Impact issue on sexuality and gender identity. My co-host is Pauline Bosma. She served as the issue editor, and she also is the founder and coordinator of the Rainbow Support Groups of Massachusetts. Pauline and I are going to be talking with Lindsay Catherine Mullis, Director of Inclusive Health and Wellness at University of Kentucky's Human Development Institute. She also co-leads the AUCD Sexual Health Special Interest Group. And with both of those hats on, Lindsay actually contributed a couple of really terrific articles for our issue on sexuality and gender identity. The main article was she wrote with her colleague, Lindsay Suave. Am I saying that right, Lindsay?
Sauve.
Yeah, Sauve. Their article called Supporting the Whole Person, the Case for Educating Caregivers. Really from their perspective in a lot of training that they've done over their careers is, how do we support the people in our lives, whether we are supporting them professionally or if they are family members? How do we support people with disabilities to have meaningful relationships that are romantic, sexual? These are the deepest relationships that we as human beings really have, and they're so important for a lot of reasons, for inclusion and for self-awareness and self-fulfillment. This is a huge topic that we're grappling with in this issue of the magazine, and so we're really excited, Lindsay, to have you here and to share a little bit about what you brought to this article, both from professional and personal standpoints. And I know Pauline, who's worked with you before, is excited to chat with you as well. So thank you both for being part of this.
Yeah, thank you so much. Excited to be here.
Yeah. So Pauline, when we talked a little bit earlier about, one of the things that Pauline did for this issue. We have outside issue editors who are experts in the field really review every article that appears in the magazine. And, Pauline and I were talking a little bit about, what's the essence of this article that Lindsay has written about, navigating these conversations, about supporting the person in some of these relationships. And what to you really, Pauline, what really stood out to you about this idea of what can we do to support people? What are some of those important things?
I think for me, what I've learned from my knowledge and everything like that is that the key thing is just having a network of either family or friends or just somebody to talk to, but also somebody that can be like you can go to and just ask questions about something and not be turned away and not be put down or anything like that. I mean, that's happened plenty of times to me where I've been put down or looked at or talked about behind my back. So I mean, I just wanted to know like how did you come up with the idea for the article?
That's a good one. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great first question, Pauline. So I think when Janet and I first met and I was giving her all the topics and ideas and the contacts and the people that are doing such wonderful work in such important area, one of the things that came up was what's your unique lens, the take that you have. And for me, I am not only a passionate professional, in this field, but also personally, I am the parent to a lovely young lady, Caroline, who is currently 10 years old, and she experiences Down syndrome and has a vision disability. And so often that role of the caregiver is not included in those conversations or in a part of the work that's being done. There's so much focus on individual education. And so, that was surprising to me. So as a parent, going to support my daughter who's on the beginning stages of puberty and thinking through supporting her as she develops her sexuality, I really wanted to have resources and support, and there's not a whole lot out there for caregivers. And then the more I dug into that, the more I realized the very, very interesting nuances of that if it comes from the perspective of a natural support, like a parent or a sibling, or if you're talking about paid supports, like a staff member, or a case manager. There's all these different considerations of what that role of the caregiver looks like when it comes to supporting sexuality. And so that's really where that topic came together. And the thing I love about my co-chair, Lindsay has such an incredible human rights approach to this topic. And I think that she and I complement each other really well, because I have the personal passion side, and then she can balance with the legal side and the aspect of things. And then that's really what we use as the voice of our article and advocating for inclusion of the role of the caregiver when it comes to supporting the whole person.
And Lindsay, you wrote that caregivers can either be critical challengers or perpetuators of the myths and negative attitudes around sexuality and gender expression. I thought that was so powerful, the way you said that, like just the importance of that role. Can you talk a little bit about that and how that shows up in your work?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that so often the caregiver is the catalyst to having positive or negative experiences in the world of sexuality for individuals. So in the trainings that I've done with a couple of parent groups, an example of the negative aspect is the mentality of what my personal values and beliefs are, like that's what they are, and that's what I'm going to impose on the individual with disabilities that I'm supporting, and how that doesn't respect the individual themselves, right? And that can be such an issue. And the flip side of that is working to support caregivers who say, I want to support my child or the individual that I work with in a way that they need, and meeting them in that supported decision-making process, and how vastly different those experiences are. And unfortunately, in my neck of the woods in Kentucky, I've had more of the oppressive experiences with some caregivers that are really avoidant, that my child has an intellectual development disability, so we're not going to talk about this topic, and I'm not going to work to provide education or social opportunities, or even think about that they would want to engage in a romantic, let alone sexual relationship. Or the individuals that just have their own mindsets or the ways that they want to view this topic, and imposing that on the individuals with disabilities. And so I think that helps me really fuel that fire to provide education and advocacy for how important and critical that caregiver role is to provide positive supports.
And Lindsay, can we unpack that just for a second with Pauline? Because Pauline, you have worked directly with people with disabilities, and I'm sure you've heard the similar stories about maybe a caregiver or family member isn't actively working against this idea, or they're not being mean to the person with disabilities. They truly love the person. They aren't trying to be backward or any kind of negative influence, and yet they just don't see their loved one or the person they're supporting as a sexual being, right? How does that come out in your experience for people with disabilities? What does that feel like when the person loves you, but you also have a gut feeling that they're trying to protect you from just real life, and that's kind of hard.
Well, for me, with like that, I mean, I have a really good story that I love to tell people, and it's really good because it puts a little thought to the person. With when it was one of my very first support groups that I went to when I started it, and I went down there, started the group, and there was a gentleman who raised his hand. He goes like, "Can I ask a question?" I said, "Sure, it's your group. You run it. You can say what you want to say." And he literally looked at me and he said, "What does it mean when I like somebody like me?" And I said, "You mean another man?" He goes, "Yeah." I said, "That means you're gay." Now, at that time, none of his agency or his people or anybody within his life would answer that question, because, like I said earlier, here in Massachusetts, we have the Department of Developmental Service, DDS. And, the agency could have gotten in trouble because the department can say, "You influence him on saying that word gay." And I'm going like, "No, you just asked you a question. You're not influencing him." But that's been a blockage, is that because people don't realize that you can do those things. You can ask those questions and not get in trouble for it. So.
Oh, this is a critical topic that Pauline raises,
right.
and it's something. Yeah, go ahead.
I want to ask her are you at least trying to educate more staff and agencies within your area? Trying a little bit at a time, but not overwhelm them, because I know this could be an overwhelming topic.
Right. Well, and I think too is what I'm learning is it's very unique to the agency, right? The specific agency that you're working to support and what their policies and procedures are, the individual staff that work there, and then as well as the individuals with intellectual disabilities that are taking advantage of that program or service, if they have a state guardian versus if they have a natural support, and how it is that their values and beliefs play into it. And so what I've learned is that there's not some very simple, all blanket answer, right? That there's this training that everybody can take and it's going to be wonderful. Is you have to really have that individualized approach based on all of those unique environmental factors. And so what I have done locally for me is I completed the training, the Elevate Us training from Catherine McLaughlin, has a staff and a natural, parents. So there's a staff and a parent training for her program in addition to the individual education. So I got trained in that program as well as in Sexuality for All Abilities. They have a staff training. So being able to have the two different certifications and being able to pull from those programs and to try to fit into what can help support what is available, right, and being asked for. But what I've learned is you got to take a little bit. They're not going to let you come necessarily and do this whole, 8-hour training or even just the full scope of the program. But if I can get even just a little bit of time to talk to administration, right, or staff, and to support this, or if I get invited to come and do a 60-minute training at a conference, my colleague Austin Nugent and I presented at the Kentucky Ending Sexual Violence conference last December. So having any opportunity that we can to provide education and advocacy, and then say, and look at all these great resources that you probably had no idea existed, just to get us in the door to get that conversation started, that still counts as a huge win, I think, because we have a lot of work to do.
And Lindsay, following up on what Pauline was talking about, that critical moment when somebody says, "Oh, it's kind of like don't say gay," right? Like we don't want to. They kind of accuse you of leading someone with an intellectual disability, for example, down a path. Oh, you've made them this way. You've done too much to influence them to be this way. How do you educate people and get them to see that that's not what's happening?
Yeah, unfortunately, I have experienced that as a response on several occasions in different settings. And typically,
so give a for instance, how has that been? Give us an example of that.
that happened to me in particular in one caregiver training that we were doing virtually, where there was some pushback from some natural supports. I think there was a parent and a sibling that were supporting the same individual. That came very hard at me that this is just a propaganda that all the DSPs and the staff have, that we're going to try to promote that there's more homosexuality in this population. And so in that moment, I said, well, I can understand that you feel that way. So acknowledging that I heard what they had expressed. And I said, but our time together here is to really focus on these resources and training that are positive supports, that are human rights based, and that we're going to focus on supporting the individual and the needs that they have, and giving them that expectation of structure as to what it was that we were talking about. And then also coming back with some of the research. There's research that exists out there that, abstinence only is not the way to go, right? That having a more comprehensive approach to sex education is going to be more beneficial. There's research that shows that more oppressive and restrictive opportunities in this topic actually promote abuse and interpersonal violence for folks with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So being able to cite some of that literature is also something that I can use to provide clout and support to what I'm saying when I say, I hear your concern, but I need you to know that we're focusing on the individual. And these are the things that we can show in the literature that supports research that really negates this false myth that you're bringing forward. And then on occasion, sometimes individuals don't care to receive that information. And I've learned that I have to just make it very clear that our time together is going to focus on what we need to do for positive sexuality supports and encourage them to continue being part of the conversation.
And Pauline, I'm curious, has this happened to you? Did anyone early on, I know you had some negative experiences when you told your family that you are a transgender woman, and that led to some estrangement in your family. Did anyone ever try to say, "Oh, you're not," that you've been told this by people? Did they ever try to argue with you?
Oh, there's been one or two people in my life that have tried. Like I had a DDS state support person that tried to say, like, she's saying, like, you're not trans, and this is all just you're just pretending this and everything like that. And and I was telling her other things. I was saying, like, hey, at the time I was getting constant headaches every single day. And she goes, well, she was saying, well, maybe the headaches are from the pills that you're taking. And I said, okay, I'll prove it to you. So I went to my doctor and I said, hey, can you wean me off some of my pills? And she goes, yeah. So I said, I got to prove something to my support person. And she goes, okay. So my doctor weaned me off and everything like that. Then about a month later, I went to go see her, and I said, oh, by the way, I'm off all my hormones. I haven't taken hormones for about a month. Oh, and one other thing, I'm still getting headaches. So when I eat the pill that's giving me headaches, there's just something else. And I said, I know who I am, and I know what I am, and everything like that, and I'm proud of it and everything like that. And I got to give, and I can't work with you no more. So I have to say, like, I gotta report you to your boss because you're not letting me be me.
Wow. And did you do that and follow up? And
yeah.
And so when you have a new DSP, a direct support professional, or someone new in your life helping you out with things, do you have any advice for other people with disabilities on things that you've done to sort of let them know this is who I am?
Just to be upfront and honest. I mean, it's like we have here in Massachusetts, we have it's called an ISP, a Personal Progress Report meeting every year. For me, it goes over everything that I'm doing, my whole life story that I've done for about a year. And in my ISP, I put that I am a transgender person. in my ISP because I wanted to let, somebody opens a folder and they open up the booklet and they know who I am. They see it, that it's there. It's who I am. This is who I am. So I'm not hiding it. And I'm going like, you got to accept me for who I am regardless.
And Lindsay, on a global scale, and it's tough to answer this, I'm sure, but if this information is getting into more support plans, is the caretaking field equipped to customize itself and handle that so that someone who really isn't going to be able to support that person in an appropriate way, there are other options? Or is the caregiving crisis so dire that sometimes those kinds of things get overlooked?
Yeah, I think that's a tough question. I think it's really going to be specific to states and systematic approaches to really knowing what the result would be from staff turnover and the issues there with being able to have access to staff. But I think, Pauline, thank you for sharing that incredible story. And I think the thing that I was coming back in response to that is having an appropriate part of staff training that acknowledges those personal beliefs and values. So that's a part of some of the trainings that I've done, is acknowledging what somebody's thought process is of what they believe that they bring to that table, and acknowledging what that is, and then recognizing that from a paid staff perspective, that now needs to go on a shelf because that's your personal beliefs and you're here to support the individual. And we're going to meet them where their needs are and where their supports are needed to have that positive interaction. And I think recognizing that for some staff that is doable, and for some that might not be a possibility. And then recognizing it's not just that individual level, but also the environmental and systematic approach from the agency, and how there needs to be policies written in place that's the expectation, right? That we're going to recognize the individual and their needs and the things that they're representing, and going to honor that. And if that's an expectation from the top down, then the staff is going to be more supported to be able to support the sexuality positively of the individuals under their care.
That's great. And can you tell us a little bit about how and why you wanted to start the special interest group?
Well, I will say I didn't start it. I joined it when we had a site visit in Kentucky from Andy Imparato, was the AUCD director at the time. And I had a pleasure of meeting him and having a conversation with him. And I told him that I was interested in the topic of sexuality, and there was no funded projects in Kentucky, but I did what I could on the side. And he said, "Oh, you should check out the special interest group." And so I started to join the meetings. And at that time, Julie Atkinson was leading that with Rebecca from Alaska. And I really enjoy getting to connect with this network of other passionate individuals. Some of them are professionals in the network, but there's also self-advocates. There's individuals that are doing work in the field that aren't associated with the USED. And so it was just a really great way to learn about the work being done in this community and connect with others. And then as time went on and Julie needed a partner, she asked me to join the ranks with her. And that was an incredible opportunity to get to be a part of the Sex Talk for Self-Advocates webinar series that we did that spanned over several years. And all of that was informed by surveys that were sent out nationally for self-advocates to ask questions. And so that was an incredible project that was done. And then as Julie retired, that's when Lindsay joined me, and we've worked over the last little bit to expand topics on internet safety. Consent's been a really big thing that people have wanted to focus on. But what I love most is just the network. The listserv is incredible. If somebody has questions about something or they need help with sharing a resource, different kinds of things, it's just a great network of folks to connect with.
And there have been some strides in getting more information out there. There's certainly some podcasts now. There's Disability After Dark. There's some that are really getting some traction. Do you listen to any of those? Are you excited about that? Is just more better? Is that as they say?
Yeah, there's so much great work going on in this field of sexuality and disability. I just wish that it was less siloed. There's a lot going on in a lot of different pockets and in different areas, and the network's a great way to stay connected. But then there's still a good handful of folks doing great work that aren't a part of the network either. So I wish that there was a national entity that could take all the wonderful things that are happening and put together a clearinghouse library of resources that we could then use to our disposal. That's the dream. That's the pipe dream right there, to be able to know all the cool things that are happening.
That's wonderful. Pauline, any other questions on your mind for Lindsay?
Well, I mean, I would, like if you ever need input, I would love to give you more input on anything that you're doing if you want my help or anything like that, because I'm always looking to, and I just wanted to like one thing that I want to just add and everything like that. It's not really a question; it's more so. I live in Massachusetts. I work, like the main agency that I work for is called Mass Survivor Standing Strong, and they're a state agency, and they get funded by the state and everything like that. And they were always, the director of the program, he's always telling me, he's going like, well, you've got to work within Massachusetts, and I'm going like, yeah, but there's a whole world there of self-advocates that need to know what's going on out there, not just Massachusetts. I mean, because you got other parts of the world going on, and they all have the same issues. They're all talking about the same thing. They're all discussing it in their own format. So we got kind of like, how do we get those dots connected to each other?
Kind of like Lindsay said with the silos, right? And you're talking about the state limitations. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think?
And I think to follow that up, Pauline, is normalizing sexuality, I think is so important. So recognizing that even in some of the work that Lindsay and I have done in the past with the SIG, we have to delicately navigate sometimes using the word relationships, healthy relationships, instead of calling it what it is, and understanding that sexuality is this spectrum of all of these different topics that can include so many different things. But just the act of intercourse, or how somebody expresses themselves, or what gender they are, all of these different things are so intertwined. And I think if we could normalize sexuality, that would also be an incredible way to help start to connect those dots.
And along those lines, I loved what you brought up in your article about just the concept of self-pleasure. No one really talks about that in disability. So that's another one too. And it's a great segue into my final question, which was, you also wrote a lovely personal story about being a mom and thinking about all of this as you raise your 3 daughters. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, actually, I am really proud of my middle kiddo. She just this past week expressed her body autonomy, and she just turned 7. And so getting to witness her as a child express to a family member at a holiday event, an adult family member that was male, I'm not in the mood for a hug right now, and my body is my choice if I don't want to do that. And I was just so proud of her, so proud of her. And so I think, again, with even in that moment, I was the only adult, I think, in the room that was proud of her. Everyone else was taken aback of like, no, you should give a hug. No, it's her body. And she was so polite and firm. And to know that, I think sometimes I talk to my kiddos and I explain things in this topic, and I try to do it age appropriately. And especially with Caroline, knowing that she's such a visual learner with her disability, try to find ways to provide information in a way that I know she can absorb it. But we don't necessarily have great conversations like we're having today on a podcast, but to know that they're still hearing those messages and they're still understanding and respecting that. Like even just the other night at the dinner table, we were talking about how girls can have long hair or short hair, and boys can have long hair or short hair. And that's a choice that they can have about their bodies. And something as simple as that is still teaching respect for someone else. And that just makes me really, really proud as a mom, and also a passionate professional, to know that these are the kinds of conversations that we need to be having.
Pauline, what do you think about that? When you think about,
I think that that's very important because, I didn't really have the opportunity to learn about sexual education or learn about anything because, my mother was a depression. She grew up in the Great Depression and everything like that. So back then they didn't talk about body or sexuality or gender or anything like that because they didn't want to hear it and everything like that. And it's like, no, we don't talk about that stuff, So, and I just saw where like it was on, I think it was on a news program, something like that, and they were talking to Dr. Ruth, where she just, I think she just turned like 90 years old or something like that, and here she is, she's still active and talking about sexual health and sexual relationship. I'm going like, and this is a woman that basically got the topic on TV to talk about it. I'm going like, here we are now. We're trying to get it out there and everything like that. So,
Yeah, I haven't thought about Dr. Ruth in a long time, but maybe that's the kind of example, Lindsay, where we do need to break through and go into those more mainstream kinds of conversations, right?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent idea and an excellent role model for us, Pauline, to model ourselves after.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I would like to just, like just ask her a question or two and saying like, like ask her a question like, how do you think I know what she's got, we ask like, look how far we've come, but look how far we've also gone back too. We've gone forward a little bit, but we also go backwards, so I mean, I understand that. So
that was a lot of our issue, wasn't it, Pauline? A lot of the articles that you reviewed, that we all reviewed for the issue, talked a little bit about that backsliding and the fact that we're all getting a little more uncomfortable talking about some of this stuff. And any other final thoughts on that? Just the idea of what the field needs to do to bring out some more of these conversations.
For me, I just think keep on talking about it, and gradually, like people might come around, but you can't. One thing I learned is you can't force it on anybody, and you got to let them go at their own pace, and you got to let them figure it out and everything like that. But I'm not gonna sit there and force it on anybody. I'm gonna say, hey, you don't want to listen. You don't want to listen. Don't be here. I don't care. So don't skin off my back if you don't want to be here. I don't care. So, yeah.
That's great. Lindsay, any other final thoughts? It's just been so good to chat with you about all this. Any other thoughts on supporting people with disabilities in their sexual lives and their gender identity?
Yeah, I think that just making sure to involve the full scope of the environment for the individual. So what does that look like? What is the caregiver role, or what is the role and the policy procedures at the agency? Going back to a lot of things I talked about today and thinking through all of those intersectional points, because if we just focus on the individual and providing them with support to advocate for themselves or to acknowledge, like you're talking about the individual, your work group or the support group that you had, Pauline, that acknowledging, asking those questions and having a safe, trusted place to be able to do that, and really focusing on that bigger scope than just individual education is really going to be key, because I don't think we can be successful if we don't consider all of those access points.
I want to thank you, Pauline. I want to thank you, Lindsay, for sharing really your life's work, both of you, with us. It's given us a lot to think about and a lot to act on, and we're just so pleased to have you both contributors to this issue of impact. You really made a difference, so I want to thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity. And following up the last thing that Pauline said, one of my favorite things when I get to talk on this topic is to have a picture of Caroline and her sisters in my presentation slides, because I want to express that as a parent, I have the same expectations for Caroline as I do for Marcella and Eva. The fact that she's going to have romantic relationships and experience heartbreak and all of those things. Like, I want them to have those same experiences, but recognize that as her caregiver, she will require some different supports to be able to do that successfully or positively, and want to take that responsibility seriously. So I just wanted to leave that.
But that's hard, isn't it? Like, how, as a parent who your first instinct is to protect them from the bad things that Pauline talked about, that that we all know can happen. So how is that for you when you do think about, yes, you want these experiences for all your daughters, but there might be, we could certainly understand and forgive if you were a little overprotective of Caroline. So how do you get over that hump?
That's a great question. I think for me, my perception on that is that we learn from those mistakes, right? Those heartbreaks, those kinds of things are how we learn and grow for ourselves. And I see Pauline smiling and shaking her head. So if we never had those opportunities for growth, then there's so much more that we need to learn. So being able to recognize the value in those moments, but also acknowledge that individuals with intellectual disabilities are 7 times more likely to be sexually assaulted. So knowing that, teaching about sexuality and being that safe and trusted place for my kiddos or for any individual that I'm supporting and helping them find that is so critically important. And teaching those skills about body autonomy and abuse reduction is an important part of the conversation. Because if I only focus on the positive things and don't support them to be prepared for the negative or for the scary, then I'm just setting them up for having more failure or for having a more negative experience. So, and I learned that very early on when I started in this topic, Pauline. The very first time I presented on this, I was like, I'm only going to have positive sexuality and talk about it in that way. And I very quickly learned the very first questions I got. You can't do that. Nope. You got to acknowledge the challenges to be able to.
I mean, like when I was growing up, my mother, I went to school and I went home. Didn't do any clubs, didn't do any social groups or anything like that, because my mother just wanted me to stay home. She didn't want me to do anything. And, and I didn't learn how to socialize. I didn't learn how to do anything, because it's like, I'm still learning today how to socialize and how to be around people. I mean, I could be around people, I could talk to people, but somewhere along the day, I'm going to go like, okay, I got to go get some alone time. So I'm going to go run outside and I'm going to go be by myself for about, a little while to get some fresh air or whatever, but because I can't take it, so, yeah.
Pauline, just
we're
curious.
all learning.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Just curious, Pauline, do you feel like when you started expressing yourself more fully as a woman, that some of that socializing got easier?
Yeah, because I went to a therapist once, right? A transgender therapist a long time ago, and he gave me a really good analogy that I like to use once in a while. I don't use it all the time. I told him I was transgender, and I said, or cross-dressing, whatever, and I said, when I would get dressed up, I would be relaxed, my brain would be calmed down, and everything like that, because it would be as one. And I said, I can go out and buy dresses and buy all this stuff, but then a month later, I'm going to be throwing it all away and buying new stuff. And he said to me, he said, who you are is in your DNA. It's part of your genes. It's part of who you are. And I kind of, took that for granted. And I said, he's right. It's part of who I am. I can't change the brain. So I got to change the body to match the brain, and I kind of figured that out. It's like, okay. And after I started getting dressed up more, my brain kind of like relaxed, and I wasn't as nervous and tensed up and going like, oh my God, what am I doing? And it just made me feel better, So, but I had to learn on my own. There was nobody to show me how to, like how to buy certain things. I'm going like, I don't know, like I went to a friend of mine. I said, how do I get a bra? Where do I go? What do I do? And she said, I'll take you out. So she took me out bra shopping because she wanted to help me, but I didn't have anybody else to help me. I said, I got to know these things,
Perfect.
So.
Well, thank you so much. This was beyond expectations from both of you. I really, really appreciate you, Pauline, helping me co-host, and Lindsay, as always, just from start to finish. You were so terrific for advising this issue. I just really want to thank you for that, and I hope we'll stay in touch and come back sometime and give us an update on both of your work.
Thank you. Yeah, so much. It was my pleasure.
Thanks for joining the conversation. If you'd like to reproduce all or part of this podcast, please email icipub@umn.edu.
Our show is co-produced at the University of Minnesota's Institute on Community Integration by Impact Managing Editor Janet Stewart and ICI Media Producer Pete McCauley. Skylar Mihailov is our editor. Graphic designers are Connie Burkhart and Sarah Kurtner. For more information on the Institute and all of our products and projects, please visit ici.umn.edu.